that the whole world is on hold right now and we can't play shows for who knows how long. I can't see my friends, and I had weird panic attacks. I had breathing problems. When I was in bed and trying to sleep, I felt like I had to breathe manually the whole time. It was really, really frustrating thing. So one morning I woke up like with basically no sleep and just went behind my computer and for some reason started writing something on piano. And I don't have a piano, I have a little keyboard here that I didn't have back then. So I just clicked the MIDI buttons with my mouse for like 4 hours when all of a sudden I had a melody that was very soothing and that kind of made me feel comfortable. It's like I wrote the song that I needed to hear to calm myself, which is something that's I don't think that has ever happened before, at least not so clearly.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's really hot here in Belgium, but enjoying the summer, so it's all good. Yeah. How are you?
You're calling from Mechelen, right?
True. Yes.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I just returned from the streets and it's super hot and I'm quite exhausted from just walking around.
Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah, I think it's 34 degrees here today. Very sweaty, very hot.
All right, so I'll just do a quick introduction. So today we're speaking with Stefan. Stefan is the frontman of the band Psychonaut, whom I discovered years ago from your YouTube cover of the song Jambi by Tool. And I went onto your channel, and I think at that point the last video that you had was Ferocious Fellow Man. So I thought that's quite interesting. Sounds pretty similar to the music I was into at the time. So I subscribed you, and at some point you released The Story of Your Enslavement. And I was very, very surprised by that song, especially how the video seemed really DIY.
Oh, right? Yeah, it was the first video, yeah.
But the song was very, very high quality when it came to production and songwriting, and especially the chorus was very interesting in the sense that it's a very calm part when it comes to singing, but it's still super intense, and the chord changes are quite unexpected. So what happened after that is you released Unfold the God Man, the album, and you did that, if I remember correctly, in 2018 on your Bandcamp. Yeah. All right. So, especially comparing that album to your previous releases, the difference in quality was very drastic. At least to me when I was listening to it. So, how did you pull off recording an album and pushing the bar so high compared to your previous releases? How did that happen?
I think the biggest difference is we just had a different production technique. The Ferocious Fellow Man EP was basically recorded live for the most part. And it was also recorded by Frank Rotier, the engineer, who has a very analog state of mind and is a really, he prefers raw and authentic recordings with not too much bells and whistles, so to speak. He doesn't like to layer too much and he likes to keep it simple. Which we thought was a fantastic choice for that EP because it suited the songs really well. But with Unfold the God Man, when we were writing the demos, we instantly had the feeling that this was not going to work for this full album. And we actually wanted to go all out and just go to a big studio and record the drums separately and then just layer everything together to make it sound absolutely perfect and huge. So we also chose to work with a different engineer, which is Kiaran Verheiden, who has also done Emerald for us, the split album we did, and has also recorded our upcoming album. And you may also know him from another band I play in called Hippotraktor. He's the guitarist in that band. So I guess the most or the biggest difference is that he mixed it and that we just did it layer by layer. And we're very happy that we did that.
I see. That explains a lot, actually, since he's from Hippotraktor, because the sounding of the bands has a lot of things in common.
Sure, yeah, it's it's his style basically. It's his mixing style that's still today. I mean, it's my favorite engineer in the world, I think. So, yeah, I love it.
When you released Unfold the Godman on your Bandcamp, to me it seemed like there wasn't a lot of traction to that release, because I would send the album to my friends and say, look, this new band that's quite underground from Belgium. And some people dismissed it, but some people really loved it too. And I was actually surprised that it wasn't picking up faster. But things changed when you got involved with Pelagic, right? So how do you, in retrospective, what do you think about the initial release of the album? And why do you think it didn't really pick up at the beginning, but then the traction went up when you started working with a label?
I think because we didn't know anything about anything at that point. We were just, we had been a DIY band for, at that point, let me count for a second, 5 or 6 years, I think. We had never had a label, a manager, a booking agency, just nothing like that. We did everything ourselves. And we just started recording the album. And when we had the masters, it didn't even cross our minds to go label shopping, because like I said, we had never done that before. So I think at that point, maybe we even thought it wasn't cool to go to a label. Maybe we wanted to stay a bit more underground. So we just released the album. And one thing that did help, though, with the traction is a YouTube channel called Stoned Meadow of Doom. He actually uploaded our album, and that helped us get quite a few more people listening to it, especially from all over the world, from the States. There were a lot of people contacting us afterwards. But then when finally, I think a good year after that, our merch guy, actually, he's the one who first contacted Pelagic, and he sent them their album. And, we were very surprised that they wanted to do it, because maybe we didn't believe in ourselves enough, or maybe we just thought that they would be full up, and, it was one of our favorite labels in the world. We thought, like, this is way out of our reach. So surprisingly, they were really, really enthusiastic about the album. So they re-released it. And yeah, that's when things really started taking off, and we grew quite a bit since that. Even during the pandemic, actually, we grew quite a lot. So we have a lot to thank. We have Pelagic to thank for that, definitely.
But your merch guy knew someone from Pelagic, right?
Yes. Yeah. There was kind of just a Facebook chat. I think he contacted one of the distributors, I think. And then he contacted Robin, the label manager, and then he listened to it and he contacted us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I remember when I was submitting my stuff to Pelagic, I don't think they replied to me. And on their site, it says they're full and they're not accepting any new submissions.
Yeah, I think that's a reality that you have to really know someone on the inside and kind of go through the back door, unfortunately. Yeah.
What exactly did you start doing after signing to Pelagic? They re-release your album. Did you start to get more invitations to tours or promotional opportunities? What happened that caused you to grow in popularity since then?
Unfortunately, we released the album on Pelagic 1 week before the pandemic hit, so there weren't a lot of shows. But what we did think was amazing was just the amount of reviews we got from all over the world. Because Pelagic, of course, they have a huge press team all over the world. They send out emails and letters and copies to, magazines and all that stuff all around the world. So we got a lot of attention that way. But yeah, definitely like the tour we did with the Ocean and PG Lost a few months ago, that was definitely also something that came from Pelagic. And I think it's something that is really good for our reputation, to kind of, I mean, maybe help people take us more seriously, I guess. So that's, you know, I think that's the biggest part of it, actually. It's the whole reputation thing. Like now we're a Pelagic band, so that, I guess that means we must be at least a little bit good, right? Because Pelagic doesn't have any bad bands. So, yeah.
Okay. So I would like to start by discussing the themes from Unfold the God-Man. Obviously, the music is deeply spiritual. I think you can see that from the artwork and the general sound of the music. But I was wondering what led you into this direction, if you could share more specifics about the actual content and the themes and the message behind Unfold the God-Man.
I think I have one of my best friends to thank for that. He was my neighbor at that point. One day he sent me an article that was, I think, 10 pages long, and it was, I guess you could call it a sort of alternative history story about the origin of humanity. It had a lot of beautiful spiritual insights in it, and of course the obligatory conspiracies as well. And I thought it was so interesting because it's not like I wasn't into spirituality at that point, but it had kind of moved away to the back of my mind, and I wasn't really actively, practicing it. I wasn't meditating or anything. And so because of that article, I got to talking with him a lot, and we just spent hours and days and weeks talking about, what do you think humanity really is? Do you really think we come from this? Or do you really think we're that old? And what's our potential as human beings? What's our nature and all that stuff? So it's, one of my best friends I have to thank for that really started this whole search. And then, obviously with, Thomas and Peter at the time, the drummer who recorded Unfold the God-Man, we just spent hours talking about it, and eventually came up with this basic timeline and, some like attention points that we really wanted to put into the songs. And that's when we wrote it that way. Yeah.
Could you describe the plot of the story?
The shortest way of putting it, I think, is that it's the idea that humanity is now not at its peak of evolution. So I guess that's something we all assume, that we're now the most intelligent and the most advanced that we have ever been. But this album kind of assumes that may not be the case. And it's specifically linked historically to a cataclysmic event that took place 12,000 years ago, possibly linked to the demise of Atlantis, and a lot of legends in that style, which are things that I got really into because of the books of Graham Hancock, for instance, who writes books like Fingerprints of the Gods, kind of suggesting that there are, like the title says, sort of fingerprints or imprints of a civilization that was far more advanced than we are now, and that there are things, structures, temples carved out of mountains without technology that actually shouldn't be possible. People shouldn't have been able to build them that way, according to our timeline, at least. So that's the whole idea behind the song, The Fall of Consciousness, which is the start of the story, actually, because the album is not chronologically. We changed it because it suited better. So that's when everything starts, and because of one event that humanity kind of descended and fell back into a more primitive state, maybe, and that we're now actually not learning things for the first time, but we're actually relearning them and hopefully getting back to that point one day and maybe even transcending that. I guess that's the shortest way of explaining it.
Nice. I love that. Why did you decide to put songs not in a chronological order when it comes to the story?
because we wrote the album chronologically, and it started with Nexus and then The Fall of Consciousness. But at one point, I think when we were like 80% done with the album, we had a listening session in Thomas's backyard. Just listen to it from front to back, everything we had at that point. And we were like, I don't know, man, it doesn't feel right. Sure, the story is all there. And if you take the lyrics and I guess you'll understand it, but somehow musically it doesn't work. To start with a song like Nexus, it takes way too long to start. So we said, let's just try something else then. Let's keep the story the way it is, but just mix the order a bit. And the minute we did that, when we started with All I Saw Is a Huge Monkey, we were like, holy shit, yes, this is how it has to start. And I don't care if the story doesn't make sense this way. But we included the original order of the songs on the artwork. So people can still listen to it in that order if they want. But this was a way better musical experience.
Well, it's like Pulp Fiction this way, right?
I guess you could compare it to that, yeah.
I was also surprised to hear that you started with All I Saw Is a Huge Monkey, because it's a 6-minute instrumental.
Yeah.
Right? That's not the most, catchy way of starting albums.
True,
and
yeah, it was
reminded me of The Contortionist, Clairvoyant, how they started with an instrumental track that's really long. But if you dedicate the time and pay attention to the music, it actually makes the experience better, because it kind of leads you into the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. We just didn't want to show all our cards immediately. We wanted to kind of surprise people when the second track all of a sudden had vocals. That would make them even more powerful. So I'm happy we did that.
In a previous interview that I found on the internet, you said that you were blessed with some experiences in the past which fundamentally changed the way you look at the universe and ourselves. And to me that sounded very interesting, so I was wondering if you could elaborate on that and share more about your personal experiences that inspired this music and philosophy.
Sure. I guess there are two things that are worth mentioning there. So first of all, getting into meditation was very, very important. I have my mother also to thank for that, for quite a bit of spiritual knowledge and experience, which is really where I started understanding what people meant with like the whole one mind thing and kind of letting go of your body and trying to feel a presence that is bigger than your body. And I experimented with that a lot. Also did things like the Wim Hof method, who is the Iceman. Yeah, you know him. Also did those breathing exercises for a good year, and which also helped me a lot during the pandemic with some weird panic attacks and stuff. So I did those things. But then, of course, I guess you can imagine with a band name like Psychonaut, there were definitely some experiments as well with some substances when I was studying, which is I think almost 10 years ago now, where that really was a thing with a few of my friends. That was really something that totally blew my mind. Didn't do it very often, just a few times, but had amazing experiences and basically confirming the things I thought that meditation would do, but had never really experienced yet. And then after doing that, meditation became like 100 times more powerful. So when we wrote that quote, that's basically what we were referring to.
Mm-hmm. How does your meditation look? What do you do exactly?
Can be a lot of things. I prefer to meditate to very calm music most of the time, because I find that it helps me stop my thoughts more easily, because otherwise I just have music in my head all the time. And yeah, that's not good when you're trying to meditate, I think. And for the rest, I try to just let go of the individual and try to expand my consciousness to first the room that I'm in, and then the house that I'm in, the city I'm in, all the way, like constantly trying to zoom out basically of my body, until I get that feeling of unity, which I've honestly only experienced maybe once or twice, where I really thought like, holy shit, that was it. Most of the time I don't get there. But it's the effort, I think, and the intention that are the most important. So it's very basic, stuff, I think.
Great. Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
All right. So looking back at Unfold the God Man 4 years later, which parts of it do you think stood the test of time and you still feel very proud of?
Well, I have to say that I wasn't really expecting that The Fall of Consciousness would be the most popular song. I would have expected it to be one of the singles, maybe like the shorter, heavy ones, like The Story of Your Enslavement. But yeah, somehow, I still don't really understand why. It also got featured on national radio a few times here in Belgium.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we have like, it's hard to explain in English, like we have this heaviest list on Studio Brussels. It's a radio station where people get to vote for their favorite metal tracks, and for some reason they chose The Fall of Consciousness, and it's been on there for like 3 years straight. So that's really cool, I guess, and it was one of my favorite songs when we were recording it, but I never expected it to be this big with other people too. But the track I'm personally most proud of, or the two tracks maybe, let's say, are the last track, Nothing is Conscienceless, because I remember that it took years to write and to perfect. And I wrote it in like 6 parts, and I rewrote every part like 5 times to make it perfect. And it's also, now it's the second longest song we've ever written, with The Great Realization being the longest, I think. And then, of course, Sananda, which I still don't really understand how and why we decided to write something like that. That was definitely like at the peak of being very into meditation and very much like diving into the matter we were talking and writing about. It's like we were really immersed at that point, and for some reason this whole Pink Floyd-ish song came out, and yeah. And I also couldn't believe that the rest of the guys liked it, because it was such a big risk with this a cappella centerpiece. But apparently people, or a lot of people really like it. So I guess I have to say those 2 songs I'm most proud of, Sananda and Nothing is Consciousness.
Yeah, I'm also very much into Sananda. But I think my second favorite would be The Story of Your Enslavement, and All I Saw is a Huge Monkey. Yeah. Even though usually I don't like instrumentals, so it's quite a surprise.
Cool.
4 years later, you announced a new album called Violate Consensus Reality. The name sounds very intriguing from the beginning. Kind of reminds me of blockchains and cryptocurrency, but I'm guessing that's not what you had in mind. So tell me more about the concept and where the name came from.
Yeah, so no, it's not really the whole blockchain thing, but I mean, I guess you could kind of apply it to that. So to me personally, I think it's best to call it a sequel to Unfold the Godman, both musically and conceptually. And also having Emerald like at the middle of the two. Emerald is like, the idea that, okay, what if we actually unfold the Godman and all like realign ourselves and become more connected with our higher potential, then what could a possible world look like? A different kind of world that is more rooted in this spiritual experience, that kind of transcends this story of separation that we've been told all our lives, that we're all individual, separate beings, separate from another, separate from the world, from nature, from animals, the universe and all that. And kind of envisioning what a new world could look like if we focus more on human beings being like sharing this interbeing state of mind. Like the first single is called Interbeing, for the same reason, because it's the basic concept I think that the rest of the album is based upon. So it's envisioning a new world based on the idea that we are actually all part of something bigger and not just an individual, or maybe not at all an individual. Maybe it's just an idea that's something we are because we've been told all our lives that we are. So it's about that whole collective approach, this whole collective application of what we talked about in Unfold the God-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that just made total sense.
Yeah,
don't have anything to add. So in what ways have you approached the new album differently, both musically and conceptually?
Musically, the hardest challenge was actually not repeating what we already did, because, Unfold the God-Man is a good 70 minutes long. And then we had the Great Realization, which is another 17 minutes basically. So there's a lot of Psychonaut music already in the world, and it became a challenge to figure out what haven't we done before. But also, how can we make sure that we still sound like ourselves? We don't want to have a completely new sound, but we do want to surprise people, because that's the most important thing to us, is that music is surprising. So a good deal of the struggle was also dealing with expectations from people, because, like I said, when we were recording Unfold the God-Man, we were nobodies, basically. Nobody really knew us. We didn't care, actually, what people would think of it. We were just writing an album for us. With this album, too, we wrote an album for ourselves, but the expectations that we felt, basically from all around the world by this point, was tough. It made us very insecure. It made us doubt a lot of the choices we made and think but is this really what we want? Instead of just focusing on, yes, this is what we want. This is the album we want to make now. So that was a big challenge, and it took longer to write it too. It took way more songs mediocre songs to throw away, to start over again before we had a final product. Than with Unfold the God-Man. So that was a really tough part in writing the whole thing, just coming up with new original ideas and letting go of those expectations. And for the rest, conceptually, I think what was a kind of a first for us is that we allowed ourselves to be a bit more angry with our lyrics, and also a bit more literal, not focusing all the time on intelligent ways of saying something and being super metaphorical about everything. Sometimes it's good to just say what you mean in a very clear way. So if you just listen to the first 3 tracks, they're very angry songs that feel more like a release than a suggestion or a lesson, which is, I think Unfold the God-Man is a bit more like that. It almost feels like with every song we're saying, this is what you need to do. While this album is way more, you don't have to listen to what I'm saying, but I just want to get this off my chest. While the rest of the album, the more psychedelic songs are still more lesson based or positive based, but we allowed ourselves to be a bit more angry. And that was really important, especially since, of course, we wrote a big part of it during the pandemic, very weird times, very insecure times. So we allowed ourselves to do that.
I love that. And I suppose Interbeing is on the more spiritual side, not the anger side, right?
Yes, true.
Yeah, it's funny how when you don't really have anything to lose, you don't care about people's expectations, but once things start going somewhere, you start questioning every stylistic change.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you feel like your musical taste and your songwriting approach is changing stylistically under the influence of the music you're listening to?
Definitely, yes. I got into a lot of new music and a lot of different types of music over the past 4 years, I guess now, with a lot of more ambient as well as funk and jazz, and I guess, more complicated music, so to speak. Like, for instance, the band or the collective that really blew my mind a bit after Unfolded Godman was Snarky Puppy, which is, you know, I mean, I can tell by your face that you know what I mean. They're just amazing musicians that are very, very good at making music that is interesting and like intricate, but it still sounds like very emotional and very human. And that's what really stood out to me. So when I got into those guys, my musical horizons just opened, and I got into so much music that wasn't heavy, that wasn't metal or anything, which really inspired me in a good way. And I think maybe that's why there are some songs on the new album that are production wise like very different. There's a song, for instance, which has piano and strings and all kinds of epic synths and all that. Maybe that's a result of that, just listening to other music and then eventually writing new music too, of course, new styles, yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. I don't think there was piano before on site anywhere.
That's a first, yeah.
Yeah, I have the same thing when I started listening to more pop music and electronic music, which also has made me start writing a lot of less metal stuff.
Yeah.
And I've also been listening to a lot of Hippotraktor lately. I couldn't really get into the music when Meridian was first released because it sounded too heavy for me. But eventually, when I gave it another chance and another chance, I started like hearing other things except for just like the metal energy. How do you compare these two creative outlets of yours, Psychonaut and Hippotraktor?
The biggest difference is that with Hippotraktor, I just write the vocals and the lyrics, whereas in Psychonaut, I write most of everything. So with Hippotraktor, it's Kiaran, our guitarist, who basically sends me finished songs, or he sends them to everyone in the band, and like 9 times out of 10, they're just perfect. We're all like, fuck yeah, this is amazing. And then I get the freedom to do whatever I want, to try things with vocals. So I only have to worry about that. I never have to worry about actual compositions or guitar riffs or anything like that. And then also, of course, something that I think I have chosen to, with Psychonaut, focus more on this personal feeling of wanting to get a message into the world. Like maybe you could call it a more serious message that I really think is important to talk about. And with Hippotraktor, it feels more fictional. It feels more like I'm just being very creative and imagining worlds and imagining stories that don't necessarily have to be so serious and have to have implications for the whole world and for humanity. It's just a way more absurd, maybe even topics that I can write about. So that's what I really like, to have both of them. Because I don't want to be serious the whole time and constantly think about societies and all that. It's fun sometimes to write about just, more fictional stuff.
Which fictional story was your favorite?
I really liked on Meridian just thinking of the protagonist, the main person, deifying his surroundings and kind of turning the trees into the gods. And just shouting at the stars like, reveal yourselves and show me so I can kill you, because you won't show yourselves and I don't want to be here. It's I really like those things, kind of bringing nature to life from this perspective of one human just growing up alone without other humans, and eventually basically asking for the end of the world through a big flood in the last track of Final Animation. I love that. I loved writing that. Yeah.
Nice. I didn't really put my mind to what the story was when I was listening.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, it's interesting to find out with the way you're telling about it. On the new album, are there any songs that feel particularly special or that stand out to you?
Good question. There definitely are. I think the one that stands out most to me personally is the track I already mentioned with the piano and the strings, which is basically the middle part of the album. It's track number 5. It's a track called Hope, and it's a song that I really needed to write for my own mental health, because I think it was April or May 2020, so like first months of the pandemic, when that whole thing had passed from like, oh, it's so nice not having to work and to be able to breathe for a second. That kind of had passed, and the realization came like, holy shit, this is actually pretty fucking scary, that the whole world is on hold right now and we can't play shows for who knows how long. I can't see my friends, and I had weird panic attacks. I had breathing problems. Like when I was in bed, and trying to sleep, I felt like I had to breathe manually the whole time. It was really, really frustrating thing. So one morning I woke up like with basically no sleep and just went behind my computer, and for some reason started writing something on piano. And I don't have a piano. I have a little keyboard here that I didn't have back then. So I just clicked the MIDI buttons with my mouse for like 4 hours, when all of a sudden I had a melody that was very soothing and that kind of made me feel comfortable. It's like I wrote the song that I needed to hear to calm myself, which is something that's I don't think that has ever happened before, at least not so clearly. And I kept working on it, and the rest of the guys actually didn't really like it so much when I sent the first version, because it was super soft. But then I kept writing and added some more epic drums and a guitar solo and this huge chorus at the end. And all of a sudden it became like a band favorite. So that also felt like an achievement for me. Like, how can I transform a demo that Thomas and Harm don't like into a demo that becomes their favorite song? That was a challenge. And that worked. So for me especially, that's a unique track that I'm very, very proud of. Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
And I know that experience of writing songs that seem boring at first, and then you try to arrange it in a way that makes sense.
Exactly.
When it comes to life, it's a different experience from just writing a song automatically from inspiration and having it work from the beginning, when you actually have to put in the work and think about it.
Yeah.
In your previous interviews, you mentioned that both you and Thomas teach French at a high school in Mechelen. Do the kids at school know that you are in a metal band, and how do they react?
They do, yeah. When I introduced myself at the start of the school year, I always mention like, yeah, my hobbies are this and that. So I mentioned that I play music. And yeah, at the end of the school year, almost everyone in my class knows it. And like, they always ask me like, yeah, can we hear something? But the thing is, so I put something on in class sometimes. And, the thing is the kids I teach, or the young adults, I should say, because they're like ages 16 to 20, they're usually more into hip hop. So for them, it's like a shock, and it's really weird, but a lot of them have basically never heard metal before, or maybe like a few seconds, and they always turn it off because it's too heavy. So the reactions are always pretty funny. They're like, what's going on? This is just noise. But then sometimes near the end of the year, there are a few that like convert a little bit. And like, actually that one song is actually pretty good. And I have had a few that actually become fans, but that's only like a handful of kids over a period of 8 years, I think. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. People who are not into metal, they often find listening to it painful for some reason. Yeah.
And I still remember that too. I still remember that it was difficult, especially getting used to screams.
For you, in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a really tough time just getting used to that and appreciating it.
And how did you start listening to metal music?
Well, I was 12 or 13 when I was I think, obsessed with Linkin Park. That was my first love, I think. And then that kind of expanded to the whole new metal bands that were popular then, like Slipknot and Korn, Drowning Pool, I remember. And then the whole punk rock thing, like Sum 41, The Offspring, Blink-182 and all that stuff. But then the metal, that was when I started playing guitar, actually. Because I was really into Led Zeppelin first and like 60s and 70s bands. But at one point I started learning Metallica songs because everyone told me they're super fun, and you know, challenging riffs to play. And they were right. I really enjoyed learning the music. And then of course I started liking the music. And then I think the first band with screams that I learned to appreciate was Amen-Ra, or maybe a band from Belgium called Steak Number 8. Now they're just called Steak. And I definitely needed to see a few live shows where there were screams and where the music was really heavy, but not because both bands I just mentioned, they're very slow types of metal. You know, it's all the half tempo, more post-metal stuff. I really needed to see that live to understand what it does. And so now, I mean, still Amen-Ra and Steak, they're huge inspirations for me. And because of that, I you know, that really expanded my taste and got used to screams. Yeah.
I see. Because for me, the whole journey started when I was 5 or 6 years old, and my father would just blast metal.
Oh, really?
in the car. So I would listen to Soilwork and Scar Symmetry, Swedish bands. So to me, that was like natural.
Yeah. Okay, that's a young age to start, but nice.
So I'm originally from Ukraine, and
Really?
I know that the Ukrainian scene, especially the Ukrainian metal scene, is very diverse and very sophisticated. But a lot of bands aren't really that known in Europe or generally in the world. I think Ginger and Stoned Jesus are quite well known, but there's a lot of other bands that are kind of under the radar. And you mentioned Steak and Amen-Ra. So I was wondering what other Belgian bands you could recommend that people outside Belgium don't necessarily know about.
Well, the first band I think of is one of my favorite bands, is called Podamus. I'm wearing a shirt of them, I just realized. Podamus. Super cool, doomy, shoegazy, tribal music, I guess. Good friends of ours, and the guitarist of Podamus also designs our album artwork. So also in Fall the Godman, that was all him. So definitely listen to Podamus. Lich is another really cool one. It's like L''ich. Bit more on the stoner rock, like, yeah, tough to describe, maybe a bit softer. Just really, really cool rock music. Let's see, what else? Huracan. Hurricane, but Huracan is how it's spelled. They're also amazing, amazing musicians who just are going to release a new album in September, which are also just amazing. I would definitely recommend those three. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the recommendations.
No problem.
I will check them out and figure out how to spell them.
Yeah.
And
I'll send you
text to the video.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's everything I have when it comes to the questions. We managed to do everything on one battery.
Nice.
Cool, thank you for the interview.
You're welcome, yeah, no problem.